Well, howdy there, YouTube. How are y'all? Good, fine, and comfy? Cool, because I got stuff I want to blab about. Specifically, how I couldn't walk for 2 years. It was a pretty dramatic life experience, and well, I want to blab and go blah-de-blah about the experience itself. Now, a couple of things before we really get going. Like I said in my previous video, I'm a real-life wet cat trauma baby. That said, we're not going to get depressed talking about all of the horrible things that have happened to me in my life, or just in general. Instead, we're going to be saying things more along the lines of, oh man, that's wild! I wonder what's going to happen next. Also, I'm a medically transitioning trans woman, so, no phobes allowed, firstly. And secondly, this really will become pertinent to the overall story a little later on. Okay, we good? We good? Good. We good. Given the theme of this video, what I'm drawing right here is a character that I'm calling my own, but that's a little bit of a lie, called Rouge Rambeau, or Rabot. She is a obvious Sonic character that I quite enjoy, but my particular take in this case on this character is I gave her Bunny Rabbit's backstory from the Archie comics, and I actually stuck her into my comic, Jam Tales, which I will link to where you can go read that down below. It's just a DeviantArt thing. Also, looking at this character, I'm realizing she's probably going to be the most disabled character in my comic, and here she's gleefully grinning as she's been just handed a disability pride flag. Let me set the stage for you. At the time, I was living out of my now non-functional van, right in front of my now previous apartment, but despite my mansion in Tent City, I was actually working full-time. Thankfully, there's a semi-decent public transit system where I currently live, and where I was working at the time was really close to one of the train stops, thankfully. I just needed to walk about 2-ish, maybe 4-ish blocks to get to the tram, to catch it, to get to work. During this time, I'd made a habit of walking from my metal tent to the train station to actually catch this tram, to get to work on time on a daily basis. I had been walking to the station and catching the tram for about 2 months at this point, when one fine day, I just started having issues with this daily walking routine. I seriously had the thought, as I was going through on this one fateful day, why can't I walk? Like, I had been making this walk for several months now, but suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere, I now needed to stop and recover at each and every one of the crosswalk crossings. It was the most bizarre thing of all. It was like constantly being like, imagine it at the end of a marathon run, and just constantly exhausted. Like, all I could think of was, man, I need to sit down. This frustration was compounded by the fact that I always seemed to get to all of these crosswalks right as they turned to the little guy that meant you could go. Give me a break. I can't walk. Crosswalk sign. Why are you doing this to me? It was the strangest feeling. I wasn't in pain per se, but my legs now felt like I had just run a marathon, as I just said, as if I was constantly just needing to sit down. Things like a simple bench suddenly became my favorite thing of all time. It was honestly a really weird sensation. It felt a little bit like I was always falling no matter what I did. But I clearly wasn't. In one of my old drawings, I referred to my newfangled condition as beef noodle legs. I'll be sure to put that up on the screen for y'all. At first, I thought to myself, well, maybe this strange out-of-nowhere condition will simply go away. It didn't. But I'm grateful that the job that I had at the time didn't actually require us to stand up, since what we were doing was assembling electronics. I'm glad that I actually have access to doctors and medical things, as I live pretty close to a university that has a fairly decent medical program. Still, it'd be better if we all had Medicare for all, but one can dream. After about a month of having the wackiness with my legs go on, I finally decide to actually get it checked out. Now, I have some theories about what's going on with me. My main suspicion at this point are the 2 bumps that I've had on my legs for years. I've never known what they were, and up until this point, they hadn't affected me, so, why really bother even thinking about it? They don't affect me. I mean, I did have a couple of times where if I tried to do something like sprinting, they would put me in some physical pain, but those occasions were extremely rare. The doctors at first thought these bumps were lipomas. Now, if you don't know what a lipoma is, don't worry, I got you covered. It's basically a large lump of fatty tissue just beneath the skin. And according to Cleveland Clinic, lipomas are also rubbery to the touch and kind of move around a little bit. It's also noteworthy that lipomas are usually harmless and don't cause any issues to the individual. I mean, it did fit the description of what these bumps were, but as we'll soon find out, that's super not what these bumps were. The next recommendation is to get an ultrasound on my legs at the University Hospital. Huh. I thought they only did ultrasounds for women about to have babies. I guess not. You learn something new every day. No, I very much want to talk about my journey up to the university hospital because it was, well, less than great, especially for somebody who couldn't walk very well at this particular moment in time. I wasn't totally sure where exactly I needed to go, so I put the address of where I needed to go into Google, and I'm thinking to myself, sweet, I can just use the train to get to where I need to go. Only one problem though. I live in an area where Google Maps has a tendency to, well, fuck up. And it said I needed to get off one stop sooner than I actually did. And I live in a mountainous area. Not helping at all was the fact that this really was where I was at the worst point in the mysterious disability affliction that I suddenly acquired. Here I am, admittedly still in some denial about what's going on with me, basically hiking up this very mountainous area, when I wear out something like every 50 to 100 feet and have to sit down. But I do eventually manage to get into one of the buildings with a service desk at the entrance. I've worn down what little walking ability I may have had at that point, and clutching to the service desk for my dear life, to stay standing up as much as possible, I politely ask if I'm in the right place. And the front desk lady says, no, it's 2 buildings over. Like, gasp, are you kidding me? Still, I am determined to get to where I need to go, and I'm ready to hobble to the place I need to get to, when the service desk lady asks me, do you need a wheelchair? Oh my god, yes, my god, yes. It hadn't really even occurred to me that I could ask for such an accommodation. Granted, at this point, I didn't yet have a cane, and I know there was still a little bit of internalized ableism bouncing around in my head. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of how these things can go sometimes. But in that moment, a wheelchair was exactly what I needed. The security guards escorted me to where I needed to go, the 2 buildings over, and they thankfully were also connected by Skybridge, so it was a fairly easy thing to do, but I did eventually get to where I needed to go. I finally get to my appointment. The doctors put this weird little goop on my legs where the mystery bump is, and run this goofy little device that kind of looks like an electric razor over where the bumps are. The ultrasound that was looking for these lipomas that I didn't actually have yielded a much more unique answer to my walking problem, and that is, I have muscle hernias in both of my legs. Cheerful, fun! I later discovered that I'm one of only 200 cases to have something like this. Okay, so this next part might be just a little graphic for some people, but I think it's interesting, so if you don't want to hear me describe what's going on with my legs in greater detail, skip to the timestamp on screen. Okay, have they covered their eyes and ears? Cool. So what's happening with my legs is a little bit like a sack of potatoes with a small hole in it. You see, there's this stuff called fascia that encases our muscles and holds them together and keeps them in place. And I have a hole in mine, in each leg, and they're both about the size of a little bigger than a quarter, causing these bumps. So it really is like a potato sticking out of a sack just a little bit. Well, that did explain what these bumps actually were, and why I did have trouble actually running all the way back in the day. And I also learned that, as I just said, that I'm a genetic specimen, a lottery winner, if you will, of this particular issue, as far as I understand. But the puzzle pieces still weren't fitting together very well. What could still be going on? Yeah, I had the answer to what these bumps were, but I didn't have the answers to why very, very suddenly, out of nowhere, I couldn't walk. Now, if you're liking this story so far, I'd love it if you were to leave a like, a comment, and a subscribe so YouTube picks up the hint that y'all like what I'm putting down. And if y'all like my art, you can find more of it on my DeviantArt page. Yes, I still use DeviantArt, don't make fun of me. Okay, so I'm a little closer to explaining what's going on with me at this point, but I still don't have all of the pieces. In the meantime, I realize I need a cane, and one of my comrades, whom I had started a mutual aid group with, tells me he can get me one for free. Now, I do want to tell the story of how I started a mutual aid group with a bunch of fellow commies on the channel at some point, since I do think it's a fun one, but we'll have to wait for that story for another time. At this point, I now have a cane, and I've basically accepted that I can't properly walk anymore. I do want to just mention that if you were to look at me, you wouldn't even know that I was disabled. The cane actually helped make my invisible disability visible. But I was still wanting an explanation of what was going on with me, if nothing else, and my answer would come to me in a very unexpected way. You remember how I said I'm a medically transitioning trans woman at the beginning of this video? Well, here's me saying that at the beginning of this video. I'm a medically transitioning trans woman, so, no phobes allowed, firstly. Well, let me tell you just a little bit about HRT and what the concoction of medications I was on at the time, and yes, this is going somewhere. At the time, I was on 100 milligrams of a testosterone blocker called spironolactone, which is somewhat vilified within the trans community, and as the story continues on, I think you're going to find out at least one of the reasons as to why. And I was also on 4 milligrams of a pill form of estradiol. Now, if you yourself are a trans woman and might be thinking to yourself, these levels feel a little bit off, well, they were within the standard range of what a doctor might prescribe to a trans woman, but it's actually double what I was on beforehand, which was 50 milligrams of spironolactone and 2 milligrams of estradiol, which is usually what a doctor would prescribe. Now, this foolish thing was something that I asked my doctor to do, so it really is on me, and I still don't really fully know why they let me do this in the first place. But at the time, I was on this medical concoction, and my blood felt like syrup, to be completely honest. But during this short and ill-advised stint, I had actually forgotten to take my Spiro one fine day, and well, wouldn't you know it, I could walk better. I finally had my answer as to what was going on with me. My Spiro was the culprit, which was causing me to also have water retention in my legs, and I had functionally kickstarted a second puberty as a part of my trans journey. Obviously, I changed my HRT regimen around quite a bit, actually, so I'm not taking Spiro anymore. Now, my journey with my own inability to walk wasn't completely over. Yes, changing my meds around did improve how I was feeling, but let's talk a little bit about the problem of getting better for a second. I was several months into not being able to properly walk at this point, and I had gotten used to my new limits. Yes, it was difficult to get around, especially since I didn't have a functioning vehicle at the time, but I wasn't really in any physical pain. I just eternally felt like I was falling or something. It was a sensation that is, in fact, as weird as it sounds. But suddenly, and frankly just as suddenly as initially waking up with the disability in the first place, I woke up one fine day with a change. I now could walk further, but I was also in more pain as well. I no longer knew what my limits were. Yes, I definitely still needed a cane, but I didn't know how far I could walk at this point. I did eventually adjust, but it took me a long time to do so. It was always an uncertain mystery if I could do something or if I couldn't. I think I can make it around the block, try, and end up regretting it later. This actually was a blessing in disguise because it forced me to start looking for work outside of the industrial sector, which quite frankly I had always hated, so eventually I did find a seasonal job as a bus driver. I wish it wasn't a seasonal job because I did like it. I did have another completely random jump in my walking ability getting better near the very end of my time at that bus driving job, except this time I could actually walk properly and without actually needing my cane. Now, I still do use my cane, pretty frequently, in fact. Sure, I can walk much better here in 2025 than I ever could in 2023, but I've recently taken to walking just about everywhere, and having my cane actually doubles how far I can walk. And I also find it's really useful if I have to stay standing up for an extended period of time. And I'm also not gonna lie, I like my cane. I think it's cool. And the third thing about my particular cane that I have right now is it has this neat little parlor trick where I can fold it right up, pull it out of wherever I have it stored, and it will form into its solid cane form. And it's quite the neat parlor trick. And that's the long, winding story of how I couldn't walk for 2 whole years. It taught me a lot, and I wouldn't trade the experience, I really wouldn't. And I'm also perfectly fine with being disabled, even if at this point it's mostly a minor inconvenience more than anything else. I hope y'all like the drawing, and if you want to see more of my art, the link to my DeviantArt page will be down in the description. And with all of that, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe with all of the things that the YouTubers tell you to do in service of that dystopian algorithm. Adios all!